All right, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, Monroe, Louisiana to be exact, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is February 1st, 2026. Happy Black History Month. Celebrations to all of our heroes, revolutionaries, our legends that came before us. And today, we are continuing our Book to React series, our 18th book in our series, where we read an entire text from cover to cover. This is episode 2 of Revolutionary Suicide by the late, great Monroe, Louisianian Huey P. Newton. That's right. Huey P. Newton is not from the Bay Area, no matter how much y'all try to claim him. He is a Monroe boy, Louisiana, born and bred. Yes, that's right. That's right. So for today's episode, we are continuing reading this book. In the previous episode, we read the introduction, the acknowledgments, and Huey's first words. Now we're going to be going into part 1, all of part 1, which is 6 chapters. It's very short. It's about 30 pages or so. So we're going to be reading all of part 1 of Revolutionary Suicide today, chapters 1 through 6. Hopefully you enjoy this. Catch this on the playback. I encourage you to watch it, dive into it, and possibly pick up this book yourself. Without further ado, let's get into it right here. So, part 1, chapter 1. Many migrants, like us, were driven and pursued in the manner of characters down the paths of defeat, but luck must have been with us, for we somehow survived. Richard Wright, Preface to Black Metropolis. Chapter 1, starting out. Life does not always begin at birth. My life was forged in the lives of my parents before I was born, and even earlier in the history of all black people. It is all of a piece. I have little knowledge of my grandparents or those who went before. Racism destroyed our family history. My father's father was a white rapist. Okay, so that explains why Huey P. Newton had that golden sheen. Both of my parents were born in the Deep South. My father in Alabama, my mother in Louisiana. I tell you, man, I'm Huey reincarnated, bruh. I'm Huey reincarnated. This is incredible, bruh. Studied sociology like me, bruh. From Louisiana like me. Daddy from Alabama like me. I'm Huey, bruh. I'm Huey. I'm going to claim it. I've been being humble too long. Anyway, Huey says, both of my parents were born in the Deep South. My father in Alabama, my mother in Louisiana in the mid-30s. Their families migrated to Arkansas, where my parents met and married. They were very young, in their mid-teens. Some said too young to marry. But my father, Walter Newton, is a very good talker. And when he decided he wanted Armelia Johnson for his bride, she found him hard to resist. He has always known how to be charming. Even today, I love to see his eyes light up with that special glow when he gets ready to work his magic. They were married in Parkdale, Arkansas, and lived there for 7 years before moving to Louisiana to take advantage of better employment prospects. Better employment prospects in Louisiana. That's funny. That's very funny. My father was not typical of Southern black men in the 30s and 40s. Because of his strong belief in the family, my mother never worked at an outside job, despite 7 children and considerable economic hardship. Walter Newton is rightly proud of his role as family protector. To this day, my mother has never left her home to earn money. My father believed in work. He worked constantly in a variety of jobs, usually holding several at one time to provide for us. During those years in Louisiana, he worked in a gravel pit, a carbon plant, in sugarcane mills, and sawmills. He eventually became a railroad brakeman for the Union Sawmill Company. This pattern did not change when we moved to Oakland. As a youngster, I well remember my father leaving one job in the afternoon, coming home for a while, then going to the other. In spite of this, he always found time for his family. It was always high quality time when he was home. Aw, okay. All right. Lakatos Kitty Maria says hi. Shout out to Lakatos Kitty Maria. Shout out to everybody out there watching. Continuing here. Huey P. Newton says, in addition, my father was a minister. He pastored the Bethel Baptist Church in Monroe, Louisiana. I wonder if Bethel Baptist is still up. If Bethel Baptist is still up, somebody let me know in the chat. There's a bunch of Baptist churches in Louisiana, especially in Monroe, Louisiana, right? Heavily Protestant area. That's the Bible Belt. But if Bethel Baptist Church is still up, I'm gonna go visit. I'm gonna go visit the next time I'm in the row. Anyway, continuing. So he pastored the Bethel Baptist Church in Monroe, Louisiana, and later assisted in several of the Oakland churches. His preaching was powerful, if a little unusual. The Reverend Newton planned his sermons in advance and announced the topic a week early, but he never seemed able to preach the sermon he had chosen. Eventually, he adopted the practice of stepping right into the pulpit and letting the Spirit move him to deliver whatever message was appropriate. As a child, I swelled up proud to see him up there leading church services, moving the congregation with his messages. All of us shared the dignity and respect he commanded. Walter Newton is not a particularly tall man, but when he stepped into that pulpit, he was the biggest man in the world to me. Aw, that's cool. That's cool. Anyway, I'm going to give a shout out to another commenter. Lakatos Kitty Maria is up in the comments leaving fruit emojis. So shout out to them. Whatever that's supposed to mean. Let's continue. My mother likes to say that she married young and finished growing up with her children, and this is true. Only 17 years separate her from Lee Edward, the oldest child in the family. When my older brothers and sisters were growing up in Louisiana, Mother was one of their best playmates. She played ball, jack rocks, and hide and go seek. Sometimes my father joined in, rolling tires and shooting marbles and keeping the rules straight. This sense of family fun and participation has helped to keep us close. My parents are more than the word usually implies. They are also our friends and companions. Okay, sounds like a very happy family. You know what I mean? Hey, man, teenage pregnancy, man. That's what it gonna do, man. You can, play with your kids. You're not too old to be running around after them. All right, anyway. My mother's sense of humor affected all of us. It was pervasive, an attitude toward life that led us to insight, affection, humor, and understanding with each other. She helped us see the light side in even the most difficult situations. This lightness and balance have carried me through some difficult days. Often when others expect to find me depressed by difficult circumstances, and especially by the extreme condition of prison, they see that I look at things in another way. Not that I am happy with the suffering. I simply refuse to be defeated by it. All right. Shout out to Gyeonshi Suha in the chat. Shout out to them. All right. I was born in Monroe, Louisiana. He said it again. He said it again. Yes, we're proud of Huey P. We're going to claim Huey P for all it's worth. He said it again, straight up in the sentence. Huey P. I was born in Monroe, Louisiana on February 17th, 1942. Coming up in about 2 weeks or so. So rest in peace and happy birthday, Huey P. Newton. Anyway, I was born in Monroe, Louisiana on February 17th, 1942, the last of 7 children. Like other black people of that time and place, I was born at home. They tell me that my mother was quite sick while she carried me, but Mother says only that I was a fine and pretty baby. My brothers and sisters must have agreed because they often teased me when I was young, telling me I was too pretty to be a boy, that I should have been a girl. This baby-faced appearance dogged me for a long time, and it was one of the reasons I fought so often in school. I looked younger than I actually was, and soft, while encouraged schoolmates to test me. I had to show them. When I went to jail in 1968, I still had the baby face. Until then, I rarely shaved. I mean, what can I say, man? All right, Monroe, Louisiana, we pretty. We some cute niggas. We cute niggas in Monroe, Louisiana. All right, what could I say? Shout out to Emma Lesh Laszlo 248. He says hi. Shout out to Chuck Chosnick. They says they. Okay, whatever. I knew I shouldn't have set the location to Budapest. If I set the location to Budapest, I knew we were going to have a bunch of Hungarians in here. I have to do that. I have to remember that next time because, I know a lot of y'all's English is not the best. Anyway, continuing here. So my parents named me after Huey Pierce Long, the former governor of Louisiana, assassinated 7 years before I came along. Even though he could not vote, my father had a keen interest in politics and followed the campaigns carefully. Governor Long had impressed him by his ability to talk one philosophy while carrying out programs that moved Louisiana in exactly the opposite direction. My father says he was up front, looking right into his mouth, when Huey P. Long made a speech about how black men in the hospitals, out of their minds and half naked, had to be cared for by white nurses. This was, of course, unacceptable to Southern whites, and therefore a number of black nurses were recruited to work in Louisiana hospitals. This was a major breakthrough in employment opportunities for black professionals. Huey Long used this tactic to bring other beneficial programs to blacks: free books in the schools, free commodities for the poor, public road and bridge construction projects that gave blacks employment. While most whites were blinded by Long's outwardly racist philosophy, many blacks found their lives significantly improved. My father believed that Huey P. Long had been a great man, and he wanted to name a son after him. All right, I got to say this. In Louisiana, we learn about Huey P. Long. I mean, he's one of the most consequential governors we had. He was a populist in the way that Donald Trump is a populist. He was, good with his words, very charismatic, and he spoke a lot to the working man and to the poor. And unlike Donald Trump, he actually put in policies to actually try to help the working class and the poor of Louisiana, white and black. That's how we're taught about him in Louisiana, like history and public schools and shit like that. He was a bit of an autocrat. I remember that, in history classes, they would say Huey P. Long was very corrupt. He would give jobs, try to steamroll his way into maintaining power as governor, and he was eventually assassinated. I forgot by who. I forgot if it was a family member or a friend or something like that. But there was talk that Huey Long could have ran for president, right? And he would have been like the left-wing version of a populist like Donald Trump. Basically like an autocrat, a little bit corrupt, but actually doing policies to help the working poor and stuff like that. So it's a big what if in American politics and history if Huey Long became president in the United States. So anyway, in our family, there was a tradition that each older child had particular responsibility for a younger one, looking after him at play, feeding him, taking him to school. This was called giving the newborn to an older brother or sister. The older child had the privilege of first taking the new baby outdoors. I was given to my brother, Walter, Jr. A few days after I was born, he took me outside, hauled me up onto the back of a horse, and circled the house while the rest of the family followed. This ritual is undoubtedly a surviving Africanism from the age-old matriarchal communal tradition. I do not remember that or anything else of our life in Louisiana. Everything I know about that time I learned from the family. In 1945, we followed my father to Oakland when he came west to look for work in the wartime industries. I was 3 years old. The great exodus of poor people out of the South during World War II sprang from the hope for a better life in the big cities of the North and West. In search of freedom, they left behind centuries of Southern cruelty and repression. The futility of that search is now history. The black communities of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Newark, Brownsville, Watts, Detroit, and many others stand as testament that racism is as oppressive in the North as in the South. Oakland is no different. The Chamber of Commerce boasts about Oakland's busy seaport, its museum, professional baseball and football teams, and the beautiful sports coliseum. The politicians speak of an efficient city government and the well-administered poverty program. The poor know better, and they will tell you a different story. Oakland has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country, and for the black population, it is even higher. This was not always the case. After World War I, there was a hectic period of industrial expansion, and again during World War II, when government recruiters went into the South and encourages thousands of blacks to come to Oakland to work in the shipyards and wartime industries. They came and stayed after the war, although there were few jobs and they were no longer wanted. Because of the lack of employment opportunities in Oakland today, the number of families on welfare is the second highest in California, even though the city is the fifth largest in the state. The police department has a long history of brutality and hatred of blacks. 25 years ago, official crime became so bad that the California state legislature investigated the Oakland force and found corruption so pervasive that the police chief was forced to resign and one policeman was tried and sentenced to jail. The Oakland system has not changed since then. Police brutality continues and corruption persists. Not everyone in Oakland will admit this, particularly the power structure and the privileged white middle class. But then, none of them actually lives in Oakland. Copy and paste that across the country. Oakland spreads from the northern border of Berkeley, dominated by the University of California with its liberal to radical lifestyle, south to the ports of Oakland and Jack London Square, a complex of mediocre motels, novelty shops, and restaurants with second-rate food. To the west, 8 miles across the bay, spanned by the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, is a metropolitan San Francisco. To the east is a lily-white bedroom city called San Leandro. There are two very distinct geographic Oaklands, the flatlands and the hills. In the hills and the rich area known as Piedmont, the upper middle class and upper class, the bosses of Oakland, live among them former United States Senator William Noland, the owner of the ultra-conservative Oakland Tribune, Oakland's only newspaper. His neighbors include the mayor, the district attorney, and other wealthy white folks who live in big houses surrounded by green trees and high fences. The other Oakland, the Flatlands, consists of substandard income families that make up about 50% of the population of nearly 450,000. Sounds just like Buda and Pest. All the rich people live in the hills and all the poor folks live on the Flatlands on the Pest side. It's like copy and paste, bruh. The world is a ghetto, as Bob Marley said. The whole world is a ghetto, as Bob Marley said. Anyway, they live in either rundown, crowded West Oakland or dilapidated East Oakland, hemmed in block after block in ancient decaying structures, now cut up into multiple dwellings. Here, the majority of blacks, Chicanos, and Chinese people struggle to survive. The landscape of East and West Oakland is depressing. It resembles a crumbling ghost town, but a ghost town with inhabitants, among them more than 200,000 blacks, nearly half the city's population. There is a dreary, gray monotony about Oakland's flatlands, broken only by a few large and impressive buildings in the downtown section. Among them, significantly, the Alameda County Courthouse, which includes a jail, and the Oakland Police Headquarters building. A 10-story streamlined fortress for which no expense was spared in its construction. Oakland is a ghost town in the sense that many American cities are. Its white middle class has fled to the hills, and their indifference to the plight of the city's poor is everywhere evident. Well, even though he says he doesn't remember growing up in Monroe, Louisiana, that sounds like Monroe. Basically, it's dead city center. All the whites and all the rich folk live outside in big suburbs. They drive to the city during the weekdays and leave as soon as it's 5 p.m. and everything is just basically dead. Yeah, anyway. Like countless other black families in the 40s and 50s, we fell victim to this indifference and corruption when we moved to Oakland. It was as difficult then as it is now to find decent homes for large families, and we moved around quite a bit in my early years in search of a house that would suit our needs. The first house I remember was on the corner of 5th and Brush Streets in a rundown section of Oakland. It was a 2-bedroom basement apartment and much too small to hold all of us comfortably. The floor was either dirt or cement. I cannot remember exactly. It did not seem to be the kind of floor that regular people had in their homes. My parents slept in one bedroom and my sisters, brothers, and I in the other. Later, when we moved to a 2-room apartment at Castro and 18th Streets, there were fewer of us. Myrtle and Leola had married, and Walter had been drafted into the Army. On Castro Street, I slept in the kitchen. That memory returns often. Whenever I think of people crowded into small living space, I always see a child sleeping in the kitchen and feeling upset about it. Everybody knows that the kitchen is not supposed to be a bedroom. That is all we had, however. I still burn with the sense of unfairness I felt every night as I crawled into the cot near the icebox. Damn, Huey. Damn, Huey, sleeping near the icebox in the kitchen. And you know there were roaches, man. You know there were roaches in that kitchen. Anyway, we were very poor, but I had no idea what that meant. There were happy times for me, even though we were discriminated against and segregated into a poor community with substandard living conditions. I never felt deprived when I was small. I had a close, strong family and many playmates, including my brother Melvin, who was 4 years older than me. Nothing else was needed. We just lived and played, enjoying everything to the fullest, particularly the glorious California weather, which is kind to the poor. All right. Jordandom in the comments says, hello, tailing a writer surgeon. Okay, I don't know what that means. Once again, if English is your second language, use ChatGPT or Google Translate if you want to say something, because don't embarrass yourself with that. Don't embarrass yourself with that. But I do English lessons. I am an English teacher, so if you want those private classes, holla at me. Send me an email. You know my email. It's not hard to find. It's on my channel. Click the About section, and I will get you right with your English. Anyway, continuing here. Unlike many others I knew, we never went hungry, although our food was the food of the poor. Kush was standard fare. Kush is made out of day-old cornbread mixed with other leftovers, such as gravy and onions, spiced very heavily and fried in a skillet. Sometimes we ate kush twice a day, because that was all we had. It was one of my favorite dishes, and I looked forward to it. Now I see that kush was not very nutritious and was downright bad for you if you ate it often. It is just bread, cornbread. Life grew even sweeter when I was big enough, 6 or 7 years old, to play outdoors with Melvin. Our games were filled with the joy and exuberance of innocent children, but even they reflected our economic circumstances. We rarely bought toys. We improvised with the materials at hand. Rats were close at hand, and we hated rats because they infested our homes. One had almost bitten off my nephew's toe, partly because of the hate and partly for the game of it. We caught rats and put them in a large can and poured coal oil into the can, then lighted it. Damn, okay, this is animal abuse. I don't know if that's... Is that animal abuse to kill rats by burning them alive? I don't know. The whole can would go up in flames while we watched the rats scoot around inside, trying to escape the fire, their tails sticking straight up like smoking gray toothpicks. Usually they died from the smoke before the flames consumed them. We also despised cats because we were told that cats killed little babies by sucking the breath out of them. We tested the tale about cats always landing on their feet. When we caught cats and took them to the top of the stairs and hurried them down, they would land on their feet. Most of the time. Okay, so he was dropping cats from tall buildings. Huey, animal abuse, Huey. Dirt was a favorite toy. We used it to play at being builders. The roof of the house was our building site. We would climb up there and pull up the dirt-filled buckets behind us with rope, hand over hand to the top of the house, and then dump the dirt down on the other side. There were no swimming pools near us, but when we got a little older, we began to wander down to the bay with the other kids and go swimming off the pier in the dirty water. Dirt, rats, cats, these are the games and toys of the poor, as old and cruel as economic reality. My parents insisted that we learn to get along with each other. When there was a dispute, my father never took sides. He was always an impartial judge, listening to both parties and getting to the bottom of things before making a decision. He was a fair and careful judge about all disputes, and later, when we had trouble in school, my father went every time to the teacher or the principal to learn what had happened. When we were right, he stood up for us, but he never tolerated wrongdoing. We were not taught to fight by our parents, although my father insisted that we stand our ground when attacked. He told us never to start a fight, but once in it, to stand fast until the end. This was how we grew up, in a close family with a proud, strong, protective father and a loving, joyful mother. No wonder we came to feel that all our needs, from religion to friendship to entertainment, were met within the family circle. There was no felt need for outside friends. We were such good friends with each other. In this way, the days of our childhood slipped past. We shared the dreams of other American children. In our innocence, we planned to be doctors, lawyers, pilots, boxers, and builders. How could we know that we were not going anywhere? Nothing in our experience had shown us yet that the American dream was not for us. We too had great expectations, and then we went to school. Incredible first chapter. Easy writing, well written, very lucid, very natural. Love the writing style. I mean, what can I say? Monroe, Louisiana, we produce cute niggas who can write well. Cute niggas who can write well is what comes out of Monroe, Louisiana, and Huey P. Newton and Simon Hill Keeps It Trail are the proof. They are the proof. Anyway, we're going on to chapter 2 of Huey P. Newton's Revolutionary Suicide. The clash of cultures in the classroom is essentially a class war, a socioeconomic and racial warfare being waged on the battleground of our schools, with middle-class aspiring teachers provided with a powerful arsenal of half-truths, prejudices, and rationalizations, arrayed against hopelessly outclassed working-class youngsters. This is an uneven balance, particularly since, like most battles, it comes under the guise of righteousness. Kenneth Clark in Dark Ghetto. All right. So, Jorandum says, would you quit your job for streaming if you could? No, because my goal is not to be a streamer, a live streamer, a YouTuber permanently. This is a hobby. It's also a way for me to study. It forces me to actually read books, you know what I mean? Because outside of live streaming, it's hard to find the time, you know what I mean? I want to be a educator. I want to be in politics. I want to be a revolutionary. I want to be a professional revolutionary and a professional political actor, animal, and dedicate my life to the struggle. That's what I want to do. And this is a part of the struggle. So, yeah, that's why on this channel, you know, we do a lot of study. We do some criticism of current events, but it's not a reactionary channel where we just read the news and say, oh my God, can you believe what the right-wing conservatives and reactionaries did today? No, we don't do that on this channel. We actually, you know, go into the text, learn, and share, and write and reflect and read, and also publish activism. That's what we do. You know what I mean? That's why you'll catch me at the protest. You'll catch me outside, you know, being with the people. So, yeah, I don't want to quit my job live streaming. I want to quit my job to be a part of the revolution. That's what I'm saying. Anyway. All right. Chapter 2 of Revolutionary Suicide, titled Losing. Because we moved around a lot when I was growing up, I attended almost every grammar and junior high school in the city of Oakland and had wide experience with the kind of education Oakland offers its poor people. At the time, I did not understand the size or seriousness of the school system's assault on black people. I knew only that I constantly felt uncomfortable and ashamed of being black. This feeling followed me everywhere, without letup. It was a result of the implicit understanding in the system that whites were smart and blacks were stupid. Anything presented as good was always white. Even the stories teachers gave us to read in the early grades. Little Black Sambo, Little Red Riding Hood, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs told us what we were. Little Black Sambo. That's what they used to give kids to read? Horrific. Horrific. I remember my reaction to Little Black Sambo. Sambo was, first of all, a coward. When confronted by the tigers, he gave up the presents from his father without a struggle. First the umbrella, then the beautiful crimson, felt-lined shoes, everything, until he had nothing left. And afterwards, Sambo wanted only to eat pancakes. He was totally unlike the courageous white knights who rescued Sleeping Beauty. The knight was our symbol of purity, while Sambo stood for humiliation and gluttony. Time after time, we heard the story of Little Black Sambo. We did not want to laugh, but finally we did, to hide our shame, accepting Sambo as a symbol of what blackness was all about. I don't think people, Jordan says, you rule, holy, now I'm hyped. Okay, well, shout out to you, Jordan. I don't think people realize, how fluid race is as a construct and how it is built on a foundation of sand. Because what we believe about certain groups of people to be fixed and natural has changed and fluctuated over time. we might believe so-and-so group of people, nationality, ethnicity, race, are like this, they've always been like this, and they will forever be like this, when that's not the case. For example, it used to be a common stereotype that black people cannot dance. It used to be a common stereotype that black people cannot fight. It used to be a common stereotype that black people were cowards and would run from battles or conflicts. Now, now it's totally the opposite in America. The idea is that black men are hyper-masculine pugilists who want to fight and fuck everything. And while they do the Dougie on you. You know what I mean? Like, it's incredible how what we call race and the fixed positions that people are in are not, are not static, Anyway, I'm going to continue here. As I suffered through Sambo and the Black Tar Baby story and Brer Rabbit in the early grades, a great weight began to settle on me. It was the weight of ignorance and inferiority imposed by the system. I found myself wanting to identify with the white heroes in the primers and in the movies I saw, and in time I cringed at the mention of black. This created a gulf of hostility between the teachers and me, a lot of it repressed, but still there, like the strange mixture of hate and admiration we blacks felt toward whites generally. We simply did not feel capable of learning what the white kids could learn. From the beginning, everyone, including us, judged smart black kids in terms of how they compared with whites, whether they could read or do arithmetic as well as the white kids. Whites were the standard of comparison in all things, even personal attractiveness. Bushy African hair was bad. Straight hair was good. Light was better than dark. Our image of ourselves was defined for us by textbooks and teachers. We not only accepted ourselves as inferior, we accepted the inferiority as inevitable and inescapable. By the 4th or 3rd grade, when we began to do simple mathematics, I had learned to maneuver my way around the teachers. It was a simple matter to put pressure on the white kids to do my arithmetic and spelling assignments. The feeling that we could not learn this material was a general attitude among black children in every public school I ever attended. Predictably, this sense of despair and futility led us into rebellious attitudes. Rebellion was the only way we knew how to cope with the suffocating, repressive atmosphere that undermined our confidence. Horrific. I was watching a documentary a few days ago about Romani, or as they call them in Hungary, gypsy children here in the city of Debrecen, where they created this, Romani or gypsy only high school for these young students. And when they were interviewing the students, a lot of them said that they felt like in the Hungarian schools, they were viewed as less intelligent, less capable, and it was implied to them that they could not do the work, whether it be math, or other subjects, right? And it's so copy and paste. It's literally copy and paste. It's, tit for tat, the same thing. You know what I mean? What Huey P is describing here is how those Romani or gypsy children describe their experience here in Hungary, right? The implicit understanding that they are less capable than, let's say, white Hungarians, right? And the sad thing about being here in Hungary, you know what I mean? They're like, the Hungarians like to say, oh, we're like 10 years behind Europe. In my opinion, they're like 100 years behind, especially when it comes to treating their minorities. You know what I mean? Like the Romanis here are like black folks, not in 1960, but more like 1900. You know what I mean? It's that bad. It's really that bad. But I'm going to continue here. Of all the unpleasant things that happened to me in elementary school, I remember two in particular. I had disciplinary problems from the beginning, plenty of them, but often they were not my fault. For instance, in the 5th grade at Lafayette Elementary School, I was 11, I had an old white lady for a teacher. I have forgotten her name, but not her stern, disapproving face. Thinking once that I was not paying attention, she called me to the front of the room and pointedly told the class that I was misbehaving because I was stupid. She would show them just how stupid I was. Handing me a piece of chalk, she told me to write the word business on the blackboard. Now I knew how to spell the word. I had written it many times before, and I knew I was not stupid. However, when I walked to the board and tried to write, I froze, unable to form even the first letter. Inside, I knew she was wrong, but how could I prove it to her? I resolved the situation by walking out of the room without a word. This happened to me time and again, growing worse with repetition. When I was asked to read aloud in class or spell a word, my mind went black and cold. Everybody thought I was dumb, I suppose, but I knew it was the lock inside my head. I had lost the key. Even now, when I read to a group of people, I am likely to stumble. That's sad, you know? As a teacher, that's sad. That's sad to hear somebody made Huey P. feel like that. And it reminds me of the quote I learned when I first started teaching. Kids don't remember what you teach them. They remember how you made them feel. And damn, this happened over like 80 years ago. And the feeling of it still burns, you know, because it's put on this page. Anyway, the other incident also happened at Lafayette. The school had a rule that you could dump the sand out of your shoes after recess just before you sat down. One day I was sitting on the floor dumping the sand from each shoe. I had quite a lot of sand and dumping it took time. Too much for the teacher, who came up behind me and slapped me across the ear with a book, accusing me of deliberately delaying the class. Without thinking, I threw the shoe at her. She headed for the door at a good clip and made it through just in front of my other one. Of course, I was sent to the principal, but I received a great deal of respect from the other children for that act. They backed me for resisting unjust authority. In our working and lower class community, we value the person who successfully bucked authority. Group prestige and acceptance were won through defiance and physical strength, and both of them led to racial and class conflict between the authorities and the students. The only teacher with whom I never had trouble was Mrs. McLaren, who taught me 6th grade at Santa Fe Elementary School. She had also taught my brother Melvin several years earlier, and since he was a model student, Mrs. McLaren expected a lot of me. I felt in turn a responsibility to live up to Melvin's reputation. Mrs. McLaren never raised her voice. She was a tranquil person, at ease and peaceful, no matter what was happening. Nobody wanted to start a fight with her. She was the exception to the rule. By then, however, even in the 6th grade, I had such a tough reputation in school, there was no need to start fights with the instructors. They were waiting for me and often provoked trouble, thinking I would pull something anyway, even when I was going along with the program. I went through a series of conversions and lapses. Each suspension brought a strong lecture from my parents, followed by a week or so of heavy soul-searching and decision to cooperate with the teachers and give my best effort. Mother and father argued that the instructors had something I needed and that I could not expect to go into the class as an equal. I would return to school full of firm and good intentions. Then, invariably, the instructors would provoke me, thinking I was there to continue the struggle. Sharp words, a fight, expulsion, and another semester down the drain. It often seemed that they simply wanted me out of the classroom. During those long years in the Oakland public schools, I did not have one teacher who taught me anything relevant to my own life or experience. Not one instructor even awoke in me a desire to learn more or question or explore the worlds of literature, science, and history. All they did was try to rob me of the sense of my own uniqueness and worth, and in the process, they nearly killed my urge to inquire. Incredible. Wow. And you know what's crazy today? I feel like I know for a fact, like, there are kids that grow up in Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, who get that from the public education system. You know what I mean? But I feel like in the West Coast and on the East Coast, the education system will be better today. You know what I mean? But it sounds like in Huey's time, it was essentially the South. And we have to remember, if you're south of Canada, you know, you're in the South. So, I mean, yeah, very dope. I like this book so far. Very interesting stuff. We're going to continue here with chapter 3. And we're going to continue right here. So, chapter 3. He who would be free must strike the first blow. Frederick Douglass, My Bondage and My Freedom. Chapter 3 is titled Growing. Throughout my life, all real learning has taken place outside school. I was educated by my family, my friends, and the street. Later, I learned to love books and I read a lot, but that had nothing to do with school. Long before I was getting educated in unorthodox ways. One of the first things any black child must learn is how to fight well. My father taught us to play fair, and when I started school, I tried to follow his advice. His principles of justice did not prevail everywhere, however. Some games ended in fights, and at the time I did not like to fight. My first year of school, kindergarten, was tough. I developed a habit of feigning sickness so that I would not have to face some of the local bullies. When the sick excuse failed, I lost my clothes and took a long time to dress. My mother saw through these excuses, and when she learned why I was avoiding school, she had my brother, Walter Jr., or Sonny Man, take me. Eventually, I began to stand my ground when others wanted to fight, and the trouble stopped because Walter taught me how to fight and fight well. All right. Jorandum in the chat says, could the system also drain teachers from their inquiry or their desire to teach? Okay. I absolutely agree with that, because as a teacher right now, one of the major problems is that these schools or the education system wants you to teach in a certain type of way. You know what I mean? And on top of that, the system also packs as many students as they can into a class. The ideal system or the ideal setup to learn is one teacher and, in my opinion, no more than 5 students. And that's coming from me as a teacher and also as a student right now. I'm a university student, and the best classes I've had are when it's just me, the teacher, and maybe 4 or 5 other people. You know what I mean? And the best classes I've had as a teacher have been when it's me and one-on-one with the student, or when it's me and no more than 5 students. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think the system can want you to teach in a certain type of way. Also, teachers are overworked. And I would also say teachers have a lot of paperwork to do. One of the things I do not like is paperwork. And I feel like with the technology that we have now, with AI, with video and audio recording systems, we shouldn't have to be doing all this paperwork. You can just send a copy of the recorded lesson. That could be audio or video. You know what I mean? And a student can rewatch it, re-engage with it that way, rather than having to read a report about what they did in class. Like, that's going to help. You know what I'm saying? But that's what I think. What do you think, Jorandum? What do you think, Jorandum? Anyway, I'm going to continue here. So Huey P learned how to fight from his brother. All right. So all of us at that time, around 1950, thought Joe Louis was a saint. He and Jersey Joe, Kid Gavilan, and Sugar Ray were our pantheon. I wanted to be a fighter too, which seemed possible because I had the fastest hands on the block. Other boys assumed nicknames: Winchester, Duke, Count, but Huey was name enough for me. I beat up all the kids on the block, not to be a bully, but to protect my dignity and to survive. Many of these fights stemmed from my middle initial. The way they used to say it, Huey P. Newton, became Huey P. Newton. And when a rhyme came at me like Huey P. goes wee, I started throwing hands until it stopped. It got so bad for a while that I wanted to simplify life by dropping the middle initial, but my mother would not let me. Okay. All right. I don't know why Jordan retracted all these messages, but they were good questions. You know what I mean? Don't retract your questions. I don't know why y'all are doing that. Don't retract your questions. Anyway, yeah, Huey really was from Monroe, because when I was coming up in Monroe, before we had mass shootings, you know what I mean, and bodies were found in ditches, like I see now in the news, we were fighting. People were throwing hands all through high school, middle school, elementary school. We were throwing hands. Like in Monroe, we were famous for fighting. I think on YouTube, you know what I mean? There was like this era at the early beginning of YouTube where everybody in these small rural towns in the South were uploading fighting videos, like hood fighting videos and shit like that. And Monroe will be in the mix on a lot of fighting videos. You know what I'm saying? Louisiana in general. Before the straps, before the guns proliferated, we were throwing hands in boxing. And it seems like he took that Louisiana energy out there to Oakland and was throwing hands. Anyway, on the streets, we had our little boxing matches. We wrapped towels around our hands for gloves and went 5 rounds while the winos stood around betting nickels and urging us on. They loved the blood and we gave it to them. We would be in there swinging, bleeding, and crying, really slugging each other. The winos called me prize fighter because I thought a prize fighter received a prize when the battle was over. They sometimes bought me a 10-cent box of Cracker Jack and I took the prize out of that. the only prize I ever knew. We could hardly eat the Cracker Jack, our mouths were so bloody. I'd never thought of fighting in terms of money. Later, I trained with Walter at the Campbell Street Center and had a few bouts at the boys' club. My oldest brother, Lee Edward, had already left home by the time I began to grow up, but he often came by the house to see the family. He taught me a lot about fighting too. Lee Edward had a big reputation in the community as a man who never lost a fight. Any boy of that time would have been as proud as I was to have a brother known to defend himself in all circumstances. Even though he lived on the block and saw some rough times, he never stepped aside for anybody. More than anyone else, he taught me to persist in the face of bad odds, always look an adversary straight in the eyes, and to keep moving forward. Even if you were hurled back 3 or 4 times, he said, eventually you would prevail. He was right. All right. Gorilla Division jumped into the chat. Shout out to Gorilla Division. Okay. Fighting has always been a big part of my life, as it is in the lives of most poor people. Some find this hard to understand. I was too young to realize that we were really trying to affirm our masculinity and dignity, using force in reaction to the social pressures exerted against us. For a proud and dignified people, fighting was one way to resist dehumanization. You learn a lot about yourself when you fight. Fighting is not just a means of survival, it is also a part of friendship. All the time I was growing up, fighting was an essential aspect of camaraderie on the block. It took many forms. You fought your friends, or with your friends, you fought an outside aggressor. If the neighborhood boasted a good fighter, word got around. That was how I heard of David Hilliard, now a member of the Black Panther Party. David was no bully. He never looked for trouble, but when attacked, he had great courage. He had won renown in our neighborhood as a brave adversary who never backed down. That is one of the qualities I have always admired most in him, and the bond that was formed then, 18 years ago, has held. That's crazy. That's crazy. How do you throw hands with somebody and then become friends with them? Okay. All right, Jorandom says, I disagree, but are you talking about the book maybe? Wait, I can't see it. Yeah, you can see the book on the other live stream. We're running 2 simultaneous live streams right now. And if you want to read the text that I'm reading, all you got to do is click out of this video and go to the second live stream. But Huey P. Newton is talking about his affinity for fighting. Huey P. loved to fight. He loved to throw them hands. He loved to mix it up with the people. And what he's saying is, like, when you fight with somebody, you end up building some camaraderie because that's how they were bonded. I mean, when I was growing up, people were slap boxing. They weren't wrapping towels around their hands and throwing shit. But there's a difference. We had the internet and TV. So, you know what I mean? There's a difference, you know what I mean? Jordan says, boys used to be men. Okay. I mean, yeah, but I don't think it's manly to fight. It's just what it is. Anyway, I'm going to continue here. I was 13 years old and just out of elementary school the summer I met David. My family had just moved to North Oakland, where we were at last able to buy a house. David, who had come to Oakland from Alabama not long before, lived down the block from us. We soon became close friends. My parents were very fond of him, and eventually he became like one of the family. We have often wondered whether we may not be kin to one another, since my paternal grandmother was a Hilliard from Alabama. We're all one big family, bro. That's crazy. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm gonna say it. I might be tripping. Simon Hill, my daddy's from Alabama. He got that Hill name. Hilliard is not that different. The Hilliard family has roots in Alabama. I don't know. He didn't distinguish. Is it Central, Southern, or Northern Alabama? My family roots go to Northern Alabama. But I wouldn't be surprised. We all got the last name of the slave owner. I wouldn't be surprised if some man named Hilliard owned us and then somebody drops the yard and just, keeps the hill. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if I got some roots or ties to Huey P's family in Alabama. Somebody let me know if the Hilliard family in Alabama is still around. I don't know, man. We might got some links. Anyway. David was the constant companion of my early teens, sharing with me all the usual activities of adolescence. Sometimes we spent whole days together, listening to records and rapping. Singing groups were very popular then. I could not sing and still cannot, but David sings well. And he and some of his friends, Joe, Snake, and Early, had a group that practiced every day one summer, hoping to hit it big. Another interest we shared was girls. Some very pretty girls lived next door to David, which made the Hilliard house a popular gathering place. The fall after we met, both of us started junior high school at Woodrow Wilson. Among our friends, there was a pretty girl named Patricia Parks, whom I had known for some time. The truth is, I think I terrified her. When I came on the scene, she would disappear. But when I introduced her to David, they hit it off right away, and later were married. Patricia is not terrified of me anymore. David was part of my education. He still is. The steadfastness of our relationship cannot be put into words. Although we have been friends for 18 years and have been in many fights together against others, we have never quarreled or had a serious disagreement. We are different in many ways, but we respect each other's differences. Beautiful. All right. Joradam says, no, I mean to be mature enough to be friends with a former scrapping opponent. Oh, I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly, yeah. Because I got into a fight. I haven't been in that many fights, but I got into a fight a few years ago with somebody who I considered a very close friend. And I remember throwing hands with him, and he was throwing hands back, and I made it a point not to hit his face. It was just all body shots. And while I was hitting him, I was saying, I love you, bro. Like, why are you doing this to me? You know what I mean? Because we were fighting over something stupid. So we were throwing hands and shit. And this bitch-ass motherfucker said, I can't be friends with you no more. I'm like, bruh, like, that was not even the worst I could have done to you. I could have really put some hands on you and hurt you for real. But this guy, and his name is Abdel, by the way. I put hands on Abdel, and Abdel put hands on me back. We were throwing that shit. But then he said, oh, I can't fuck with you no more. Man, fuck you, bruh. What type of pussy shit is that? For real. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm still not over that. That bugs me. That bugs me because I had love for Abdel for real. But I was like, you don't want to be friends just because we threw hands like men? You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm going to continue here. So another good friend in junior high was James Crawford. He was a couple of years older than me, but behind in school. James and I used to fight each other a lot, falling out one day and coming together again the next. He could beat up most boys in the school, including me, and whenever we fought, I would lose, but I always came back with some kind of equalizer, a baseball bat or a short piece of rubber hose with a metal insert. He had to give me respect because even when he beat me, I would come back to him. James and I stopped fighting each other in 1953 when we formed a gang called the Brotherhood, which eventually numbered 30 or 40 regular members, all of them 7th and 8th grade black boys. Another gang of 9th graders were our allies. Crawford and I were the leaders. The Brotherhood, one of the few gangs in North Oakland, was a direct response to white aggression at school. At that time, blacks were a small minority at Woodrow Wilson, and all the blacks there viewed each other as blood relations. We called ourselves brothers or cousins and banded together to fight racist students, faculty, and administration. Back then, white staff people and students routinely called black people niggas, and tension was high. Let's repeat that. Back then, it was common in the public school for the students and the staff who were white to call the black students niggas, the N-word, hard R. Think about that, man. That's crazy. That's America for you, baby. That's America. Continuing here. Black students stuck together on the playground, too. We had outgrown hide-and-go-seek, King of the Mountain, and Ring-a-Levio. But our game still reflected our poverty. We spent hours rolling dice and pitching and flipping pennies. Since none of us ever had enough money to buy lunch or even milk, we gambled for these things. We also played what some kids called capping or the dozens. This is a game of verbal assault in which kids insult each other by talking about sexual liberties they have taken with the opponent's mother. It is a very common game in the black community. My contests would often end in fights because I was no good at putting people in the dozens. In the mornings, David and I often talked about how to cap Crawford. But when we got to school, Crawford usually outcapped us. A typical dozens from Crawford might go like this. Motorcycle, motorcycle, going so fast. Your mother's got a pussy like a bulldog's ass. Okay. They were just words, and we were good friends in spite of it. Really tight partners. All right, Corinne Harper 9548 says hi from Great Britain. Cheerio. Hello, governor. My years in junior high were a repeat of elementary school. The teachers attempted to embarrass and humiliate me, and I countered defiantly to protect my dignity. While I did not see it at the time, fierce pride was at the bottom of my resistance. These struggles had the same result. I continued to be suspended from school. My parents, the principal, and the counselor lectured me for hours, and I would again make up my mind to knuckle under and go along. As soon as I hit the classroom, however, there would be another provocation, another visit with the principal, and back on the streets again. It was a kind of revolving door. Each week, things were the same. The one class I took in junior high school that was not painful was a cooking class taught by the only black teacher I had in all my years at school, Miss Cook. There was a reason for my taking this class. Most of the white kids had money to buy their lunch, but my family could not afford that. Since I was too proud to bring my lunch in a brown paper bag and be ridiculed by my friends, I took cooking and eating. It was either that or gambling or stealing from the white kids. Crawford and I were in the same class, and we were always getting kicked out together. I remember clearly one of the teachers at Woodrow Wilson, Mrs. Gross. We had her 3 periods every day in what was called the dumb class. Only blacks were in it. We spent each day gambling and poking each other and generally raising hell. Crawford would shoot a rubber band at me, or I would slap him on the head, and then we would fight, and Mrs. Gross would kick us out. Sometimes she sent us to the principal's office, and sometimes she told us to stand in the hall. When we were booted from one of her classes, we were out for the whole day. It was a form of liberation from the dumb class. Her class was particularly bad during reading sessions. We hated being there to begin with because we were not interested in what Mrs. Gross was saying. When the reading aloud sessions came, we were frantic to get out. We could not read, and we did not want the rest of the class to know it. The funny thing is that most of the others could not read either. Still, you did not want them to know it either. At the time and earlier, I associated reading with being an adult. When I became an adult, I would automatically be able to read too. It was a skill that people naturally acquired in the process of maturation. Anyhow, why should I want to read when all they gave us were irrelevant and racist stories? Refusing to learn became a matter of defiance, a way of preserving whatever dignity I could hold onto in an oppressive system. Therefore, when it was time for Crawford or me to read, we made a conscious effort to get kicked out of class, and we were usually successful. Then we would sneak out of the school and steal a bottle of wine or ride our bikes to one of our parents' houses and while away by the day playing cards. Later, after school let out in the afternoon, we often sneaked into the movies with other kids or went to David's house and listened to records and danced with the girls. This is pretty much the way things went all during junior high. On the surface, my record was dismal, yet those years were not significantly different from the adolescence of many blacks. We went to school and got kicked out. We drifted into patterns of petty delinquency. We were not necessarily criminally inclined, but we were angry. We did not feel that stealing a bottle of wine or cracking parking meters was wrong. We were getting back at the people who made us feel small and insignificant at a time we needed to feel important and hopeful. We struck out at those who trampled our dreams. James Crawford had his dreams. He dreamed of becoming a great singer. There were days when Melvin and I sat listening for hours while James sang in his beautiful tenor voice. He was also a good cook and dreamed of opening a restaurant. James Crawford was talented, but the educational system and his psychological scars held him back. He never learned to read. To this day, he cannot read. His fear of failure was reinforced rather than helped by those charged with his education, and his dreams slipped away. As he became more fearful and frustrated with each passing year, James was finally expelled from school as an undesirable. Gradually, he sank into alcoholism and has been in and out of state mental hospitals since our school years. His face is scarred where the police beat him. That is the story of my friend James Crawford. Another dream blown to hell. Sad. Very sad. Almost brings a tear to your eye. And it reminds me of in Malcolm X's book when he spoke about all the genius black people he met in Harlem, right? Who could do incredible mathematical calculations in their head and could have incredible oratory skills and reasoning abilities and ways to convince people with words and things like that, and how their lives were just sort of shattered because of racism and lack of opportunities and things like that. Very similar to Malcolm X's book. This is what we're going to do. We're going to wrap it up here. We're going to stop right here on chapter 4 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. We've been reading for about an hour or so. We read about 3 chapters. I don't want to overdo y'all and hit y'all too much. So we're going to stop after reading those first 3 chapters of Revolutionary Suicide, where he talks about growing up in Louisiana, then going to Oakland, and how the school system basically, broke his spirit. We're going to read the next 3 chapters in our next live stream, possibly tomorrow. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Shout out to everybody who joined in the live stream. Shout out to Corinne Harper, Jorandom. Shout out to Gorilla A Division. Shout out to Chak Saznik, Emeshe Laszlo, Lakatosh Kitty, and everybody else who's watching this in the playback. And by the way, don't redact your messages. Leave your messages up. You know what I mean? Leave them up. Leave them up because we want to see what the people have to say. All right? Y'all be easy out there. Catch you tomorrow for Revolutionary Suicide, episode 3. And peace.